Kane Smith here from canesmithcopywriter.com, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to plan a live launch webinar funnel. Okay, I get asked about these quite a lot from leads who approach my business and they're looking for a sales webinar to be the vehicle to sell their membership or course or program, or existing clients who would maybe stick with traditional sales page methods and they're thinking of using a webinar to launch their product, but they're maybe a bit daunted by it. They think it looks complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. So this video will go about showing you how I structure the messaging of a live launch webinar funnel. And if you plan to have, say, a more evergreen webinar piece, you know, an automated or an on-demand one, all the principles I talk about here and the tactics for launching a live webinar, you can take a lot of those and apply them to an automated webinar too. If all this talk of the different types of webinars is confusing you, if you're new to the game, I've created another video on this, the 4 different types of webinars. I'll put a link to that in the comments, and that should clear up any confusion. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. I create at least 1 video a week. So let's get to it. Okay, what I do is I break down the launch into 3 different phases, okay? And this doesn't include the pre-launch phase. I'm going to be creating separate videos on the pre-launch. Here, I'm going to assume you've already nurtured your audience with some pre-launch content, some pre-launch emails. They sense that something's coming. And now we're going towards the selling part, okay? I'll break it down into 3 different parts. So the first phase, okay, phase 1 is you have a webinar and you obviously want to get registrants. You need people to attend the webinar to watch it. So the first thing you want to do is create a landing page, a registration page where that, you know, it sells people on your web. The webinar is the offer at this point, not the actual product that you're going to pitch at the end of the webinar. So you'll want an invitation sequence, okay? Phase 1 is the invitation phase, where you reach out to your list and you drive them towards the landing page so they can register for this webinar. I write typically 5 invite emails to my clients' lists. And if you're familiar with the Russell Brunson framework of hook, story, offer, okay, for each one of these 5 emails, the offer remains the same. And I stress the offer is the webinar itself. You don't want to be mentioning the product at all, okay? The product gets pitched at the end. The offer is the value your subscribers are going to receive by attending the webinar and learning about whatever topic you're going to be teaching for the bulk of that webinar, for at least 2/3 of it. But the hook and the story on each one of these emails will change. We're trying to get the same outcome. There's a link in those emails that drive people to the landing page. So you want to tease, create a lot of curiosity and intrigue. You want to get that click. And then you can explain what the webinar is going to be about in more detail on the landing page. You don't want to go into loads of detail in the emails. You just want to stoke that curiosity, get the click, and get them on the landing page where they can actually enter their contact information again so that they can end up on what we call a hot list. All right. So if you've built up, let's say you have a list of 2,000 people and you've managed to get 100 of those 2,000 people to sign up to your webinar. Those 100 people are now on a separate sub list. You ideally want to tag them. And we can call that the hot list. All right. They were warm traffic and they've now become hot for this particular offer because they've indicated their interest. They've raised their hand. They've signed up to attend the webinar. So you want to build a hot list for your webinar. And this is what happens during the invitation phase. Okay. Phase 2 is the show up phase. What people have signed up for the webinar. Maybe the webinar is a week away, you know, maybe a couple of weeks away. So we need to keep reminding them of it, keep them excited about it and keep it fresh in their mind. But what you don't want to do is just think of this phase as the reminder phase, okay? We don't send reminder emails. They're boring. They don't have much value. No one's going to really pay much attention anyway until the last minute. So what you want to do is you want to keep people revved up about it. Get people excited. You want to remind people of the reasons why they signed up, reiterate the benefits. So these emails should really kind of stoke a further sense of curiosity and should get people more excited than they were initially to attend the webinar. Okay. And I typically, you know, with these show up emails, I typically write at least 4, maybe 5 of those. It depends how far away the webinar actually is from the point of registration. You'll at least want one that goes out like at least an hour before the webinar starts, or maybe even 30 minutes, just to give people that final nudge before you send the email that says, right, the webinar is now live. And tracing your steps back from there, you'll want one the day before, one day out. You might want one that's 3 days out. If your webinar is not for another week, you'll want a 1 week out. It largely depends on how far away your webinar actually will be from the point of registration. So 4 to 5 of these show up emails to try and get maximum show up rate. Because if you've had 100 people who've signed up and registered for the webinar, if you can get half of those, if you can get 50 showing up to the actual webinar, you've done well, okay? Because a lot of people sign up to these things and then they just either forget, or the schedule gets too busy, or they change their mind and they're just not as interested as they were before and they don't show up. And that's what we want to avoid. We want people to be just as enthusiastic about it as they were before. And then we enter into phase 3, which is by far away the most critical part of the funnel. All right. So you've got people to sign up for the webinar. People have attended and watched it. You've pitched your product in the final third of the presentation, typically the final third. And what won't happen is, unless you have raving fans who, have from as far back as the pre-launch content, they've been ready to buy. But typically people will attend the webinar, they'll hear your sales pitch, and now they're going to enter like a consideration phase where maybe they're on the fence, they're thinking about buying, they're not going to whip out the credit cards here and then. So this is where phase 3, the follow-up phase, is absolutely critical. All right. The fortune is in the follow-up. And this is where you can break your hot list off into 3 different buckets. Okay. You've got the people who attended the webinar and watched right to the end, because most webinar software will enable you to track, who's been engaged, how long people have stayed online for. So the people who attended the webinar, stayed till the end and saw your sales pitch, you'll want to hit them with a follow-up sequence. All right. They've seen your presentation. They don't need to see a replay. What you want to do now is send them to a sales page if you have one. So you want emails with a link that drives people to the sales page. Or if you haven't created a sales page for your product, if you're like, well, my webinar presentation is kind of the sales letter, you'll need at least an order form to capture people's payment information. So drive those people to either the sales page or the order form to get the sale. And you'll want a sequence of at least 3 to 4 emails to follow up with those people, pushing them towards, a conversion device of some sort. The next segment of the list is the people who attended the webinar, but they dropped off. They left before they actually saw, excuse me, the sales pitch at the end. So these people kind of saw the educational content, but they might not even be aware of your product because they didn't stay to the end, which is the point where you pitch the product. So they are at a different level of awareness to the people who stay to the end. So they'll need a separate follow-up sequence, okay? And what you want to do with those is you will want to loop them back to a replay of the webinar and remind them that there's critical content that they missed out on. So, maybe you appreciate they had to leave early, but here is a replay of the webinar. And you might want to send them, a couple of emails driving them towards the replay. And then from there, you can segue into a shorter mini sequence where you start driving them towards the sales page to get the sale. Okay. And the third segment of the list are the people who signed up to the hot list, but they didn't attend. They didn't show up. And there are a lot of people who do this. They'll sign up. They'll think, I know for a fact I can't be there live to watch it. But the people are so used to getting sent to the replay, they'll be like, oh, I'll catch up and watch the replay whenever I can. And these people, I do this myself. I very, very rarely watch webinars live. I'll sign up to a webinar that really interests me, knowing full well I probably won't be able to attend it live, but I'll catch up with the replay in my own time, okay? So they need to be hit with a sequence where they're sent to the replay, and you might need to jazz them up a bit more, just like you did in phase 2, get them excited about watching the replay. And then just like the other bucket, then you can segue them into a shorter mini sequence, driving them towards the sales page or the order form. And this is totally optional, but it's something I recommend my clients, is the broader list. Okay, so you had a bunch of people who signed up for the webinar who indicated some interest to attend, and then you had a bunch of people who didn't sign up for the webinar and they indicated that they weren't interested. I'd hit them with at least one email with a link to the webinar replay, just basically saying a message along the lines of, look, I held this event and you didn't sign up, you missed out. However, we spoke about loads of cool things. If you've had people from your list sending you messages, with praise or with comments, your positive comments, you can say, look, the people who attended got this value out of it. It was really cool. I think you'll benefit a lot by watching it. So here's a link to the replay. And then you can possibly scoop up people from the list who weren't interested the first time round, but now through a sense of FOMO, they might be interested in watching your presentation and getting to see your sales pitch at the end. So in a way, there's 4 buckets there. There's 3 segments of the hot list and your broader list. Send them the replay as well. I know that seems very granular. And yes, you don't have to go into that much detail. For instance, the middle bucket, the people who attended the webinar but dropped off, maybe you don't have software that tracks that. So you'll just have to treat them as like the other attendees. You'll have to assume that maybe they saw the sales pitch and send them towards the sales page. But in an ideal world, you want separate messaging because everyone's going to be at a separate awareness level. And this is crucial, okay? I've spoken with clients who don't follow up at all after a webinar. They hold the webinar, they deliver the sales pitch at the end, and then they don't send any email sequences afterwards to follow up and mop up the sales. And this is where you're going to get the vast majority of your sales. It's in the follow-up email sequences that follow after, okay? All right, so that's it. That was quite a high-level view of how I structure a live launch webinar funnel. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and in the comments, you'll find a link to some free email training, okay, where I explain how to write effective sales emails that overcome your audience objections to the sale. This training is ideal for using on your follow-up sequences that immediately follow the webinar, because at this point you've pitched the product, people might be interested, but they might have objections, and this free training will show you how to overcome those objections to get the sale. All right, that's it from me this week, and I'll see you on the next video.